Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
My name is Maria Elena Perales, and I am the Justice Director for the Justice Center for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange. Welcome to the 2022 CSJ Center Symposium, Faces of Justice, Transforming Thought, Transforming Action. We are honored to have been invited to host this session this morning. Compassion knows no borders. As people of faith, we are called to respect the dignity of all human beings. In his message of the 2021 World Day of Migrants and Refugees, Pope Francis stated, in order to ensure proper care of our common home, we must become a we that is even wider and more co-responsible. In the profound conviction of whatever good is done in our world is done for the present and future generations. Ours must be a personal and collective commitment that cares for all of our brothers and sisters who continue to suffer, even as we work towards a more sustainable, balanced, and inclusive development. A commitment that makes no distinction between the natives and foreigners, between residents and guests, since it is a matter of treasure we hold in common, for whose care and benefits no one should be excluded. Today, we will hear about a collective commitment caring for our vulnerable immigrant brothers and sisters south of the border, seeking asylum. A group of caring people have responded to the humanitarian need. They help provide much needed food, clothing, and support. They guide and try to assist as much as they can with the help of the many families seeking asylum who are trying to avoid being sent back to their home countries, where they may face threats, harm, and possible torture. Why are families living in this makeshift shelter, you may ask? Well, as of March 2020, the Remain in Mexico policy, also known as MPP, denies all new asylum seekers access to asylum process, and they are being returned to Mexico on their own country of origin. Immigrants fleeing violence and persecution find it impossible to return to their home country and remain at the border, living under unsafe and dangerous conditions. Cabina Posada del Migrante is an immigrant shelter south of the border in the town of Mexicali, where vulnerable families fleeing violence and insecurity anxiously wait for a chance to apply for asylum. Today, we have an opportunity to hear from our four panelists: attorney Troy Elder, asylum seeker Gustavo Cermeño, immigrant advocate Amalia Cortina, and Sister Suzanne Jabro, founder of Border Compassion. They will share from their experience the challenges and struggles families who have been denied asylum have experienced and continue to face. I will now introduce our first panelist, Troy Elder, migration, missionary, and attorney for the Episcopal Diocese of San Diego. Mr. Elder, a community and faith-based activist and former law professor, coordinates ministry activities in the Diocese of San Diego related to U.S.-Mexico border and migration issues. He spent a decade teaching immigration law and poverty law, international human rights, and ethics at U.S. and foreign law schools, most recently at Yale. Mr. Elder served as the bishop's legate for Global Partnership at the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles. After moving to the San Diego Diocese, he served as a senior attorney at Immigrant Defenders Law Center in San Diego, Tijuana, and Mexicali, where he supervised systemic and appellate work at the U.S.-Mexico border on behalf of immigrants subjected to Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP. Most recently, along with the other Episcopalians, he was a founding member of the Desert Support for Asylum Seekers, which assists migrants on both sides of the border at Calexico, California. Troy is married to Reverend Lorenzo Lebrija, an Episcopal priest, and is partnered for 19 years. They live in Cathedral City. So now I invite Troy. Thank you for joining us on this panel, and it is all yours.
Thank you, Maria, for that nice introduction and for the invitation to be with everybody today. As I was walking to work, I was thinking about, well, I was actually engaging in one of my favorite Jesuit spiritual practices, which is a podcast that I suspect many of you know called Pray As You Go, which comes out of Britain. And I was, thinking about the values that this university espouses as part of 500 years of Jesuit teaching in so many ways, and faith and reason combined. And I was hoping actually that the podcast would maybe have some sort of nugget in terms of the scripture reading that would be, I don't know, appropriate to the travails of migrants, something from Exodus, maybe something from Job. But no, it was the hemorrhaging woman. And so I was trying to think of a way to work that in, but I can't muster it. But I am thrilled to be part of this conversation, both on the spiritual side and the legal side, because I do think it's hard to do one without the other, at least in my case. And so I'm very fortunate to have been brought along by Sister Suzanne and others here on this call in the important work that's going on in Calexico and Mexicali. And what I was asked to do basically was to focus on some of the nitty-gritty of the law. And I'm just checking my timer here so that I don't go past my 15 minutes, which I've already probably used one or two. And I want to focus on three big, I guess you'd call them obstacles, procedural and substantive obstacles. One was referenced a few minutes ago, and that is the so-called Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, also known as the Remain in Mexico program. The next is the continued border closure under ostensible public health rationales called Title 42. And then I want to speak a little bit next about the immigration court asylum backlogs in the United States, because these three phenomena, if you will, combined with the larger failure, frankly, of our immigration system to accommodate low-income workers and others who would like to come here through legal processes. Those three obstacles, legally and procedurally and physically, when you're coming to a port of entry or a border, pose the biggest problem and the most enduring problem, it seems, even under a new administration, for migrants, those subject to forced displacement from all over the world, whether that's on grounds of persecution because they have a political opinion contrary to that of their government, whether it's because they're fleeing conditions of what we've now started calling hyper-violence in Central America. I was actually, last week, I was in Central America and followed with a group of clergy and lay folks, followed the so-called migrant road from Guatemala City west through the southwest portion of that country up to southern Mexico to a little town called Tapachula, which is just on the Mexican side of the Guatemala-Mexico border. And for the last couple of years has been a bottleneck, if you will, a place of a staging area, and some have even called it an open air prison city for thousands of migrants from not just Central America, but also Haiti, Africa, and from places as far away as Russia and in India. So there's that type of physical phenomenon. But once the migrants are actually able to get to the border, our southern border with Mexico, it's really these three programs that create sort of a multifaceted challenge, if you will. Challenge is, I think, treating it sort of lightly to getting across. So what is the Migrant Protection Protocols or Remain in Mexico program? As Maria mentioned, in the waning days, I guess, well, not really waning days, but in the third year of the Trump administration, a policy was devised to require migrants who approached the southern border of the United States with Mexico to wait out their asylum cases in Mexico, as opposed to what international law and treaties that the United States have signed requires, which is that you be allowed to present your asylum case while you're in the country, and that you be guaranteed some safeguards of security while that process unfolds. And as you'll see in a few minutes when I talk about the court situation, it's a very long process. So what did MPP do? Well, a couple of things. It basically caused a huge bottleneck on the northern border of Mexico, the border with the United States, and created, as you may recall from the news a couple of years ago, down in Texas, it created huge tent cities on the Mexican side of the border. In more urban areas like Tijuana and Mexicali, it caused a crushing demand on the very scant resources that are available in those Mexican cities to house folks who are subject to forced displacement, who are fleeing for various reasons. So it caused a humanitarian crisis, basically, that we hadn't seen before. We actually had, when I say we, the United States had refugees in refugee camps at our borders, something that was pretty much unprecedented, and something that, frankly, is, I think, and many others agree, is a national shame and is an affront to the principles of Jesus Christ and what we try to embody when we enact, I would say, welcoming and humane immigration laws that welcome the stranger, that welcome the newcomer. What did the MPP program mean on a practical level? Well, the course of one's immigration case is long, and the MPP folks, first of all, were in a kind of a vacuum or a black hole of knowledge, not knowing what the process was about. There are very few US immigration lawyers who practice on the other side of the border, practice US law on the other side of the border. So just getting information, let alone pro bono lawyers who might be convinced to take a case, but to go to some of these cities, there's a danger component for the lawyer, there's a logistics component, there's a linguistic component for folks who don't speak, for the most part, Spanish or Haitian Creole. And this provided a huge disincentive for lawyers to be able to come down and just educate folks, with few exceptions. Frankly, I was one of the exceptions in the number of agencies actually. And when I say agency, I mean like a legal aid office or a faith-based legal aid office or other types of nonprofits who do work on both sides of the border. But very few folks actually got lawyers. And when you don't have a lawyer going through a complicated process like US immigration law, US asylum law, which rivals the tax code in terms of its complexity, you're much less likely to, number one, understand what's going on, and number two, actually prevail in your case. Migrants who, let's take the example of Mexicali, since we're going to talk about that shelter in a few minutes, they were given court dates every so often, maybe every 2 to 3 months, where they would need to make their way for a 7 a.m. Check-in at the port of entry in Tijuana, where they, once they were admitted, would be bused with everybody who had court that day into San Diego for their hearing. This would happen over the course of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. So you can imagine the difficulty that folks have, even those who had some modest resources, in living in a city like Tijuana, quite dangerous in itself, and also sometimes not particularly safe from the very causes that the reasons they fled their own countries. A lot of, for example, Central American gangs are operating with cartels in Mexico. I remember one time being at the shelter in Mexicali a few weeks ago, I guess, and one young woman was showing me texts on her phone from the gang that had persecuted her and her husband back in southern Mexico. And she said, they're telling me they're right outside this shelter. So remain in Mexico or migrant protection protocols is really sort of a Orwellian kind of euphemism, and not even a euphemism, it's just complete distortion. The migrants are not protected. They're not really subject to any sort of expedited treatment, and they're forced to wait it out, if not in a makeshift migrant camp like down across from the Texas border, then in pretty much squalid conditions in pretty dangerous border cities in Mexico. And that program is one of the first programs that President Biden attempted to undo, kind of with the stroke of a pen. And when he did that, it was undone for about 3 or 4 months until some conservative governors in Texas and Arkansas, or maybe it was Missouri, I'm trying to forget this case, but sued successfully, and a Texas judge, and this was upheld in Texas appellate courts as well, federal courts in Texas, basically required President Biden and his staff to restart the Remain in Mexico program. So that was a loss in the courts. It's still winding its way through up the appellate chain into the Supreme Court, but for the moment, the Supreme Court has endorsed the restarting. So the tents are going back up, the busing is going to resume, and folks are continuing to be subjected to this horrible system. So the second feature I wanted to talk about is Title 42. Title 42 is what Maria mentioned a few minutes ago. I believe in March of 2020, the Trump administration closed the southern border to pretty much all traffic. Over time, this is due to COVID, ostensibly. Over time, two things happened. The border was little by little reopened to large numbers of a large bit of traffic. For example, in San Diego, there's thousands and thousands of crossings back and forth every day. And little by little, those folks who were going across to go to school, or who had business on one side of the border, and eventually this past fall wanted to engage in tourism, they were let across. No COVID test necessary, no vaccine requirement, largely, if you're crossing a land border. The one group that has continued to be subjected to Title 42 is basically asylum seekers who are ready and willing to get COVID tests and vaccines if they're available, and who are a tiny, tiny fraction of the overall border traffic. So it really is farcical that the government continues to maintain that there's a public health justification for keeping out this small and probably the most needy and the most, in some cases, deserving in terms of international human rights law of protection, keeping these folks out. So now we have these two policies that are really just two barriers. And Title 42 basically enables the US government to expel folks, to turn back folks at a legal port of entry, a legal border crossing, and to expel folks who cross in between ports of entry. In other words, who cross illegally, if you will. And the expulsions have been the source of huge numbers, because folks will continue to try when the border is closed, and when you're otherwise subjected to NPP, folks continue to try to cross in between border crossings. And so now the US government in the last 6 months has actually begun, in concert with the Mexican government, to fly folks back down to southern parts of Mexico, Tapachula, the city I mentioned that I was in last week, basically pushing, if you will, our southern border down to 2,500 miles south of Tijuana, 2,500 miles south of San Diego, frankly, to southern Mexico. So that those two policies are pretty pernicious, and we thought we were going to be done with them, and we are not. And so they are they are the legal framework that migrants confront in Mexico. There was a little bit of a chink in the armor, if you will, for about 6 months last summer, when, because of litigation brought by the ACLU, the U.S. government was allowing folks exemptions to the Title 42 bar, basically, to the border closure. And those were for extreme humanitarian circumstances, families with young children. And so a lot of the work, the legal work we did at the shelter last summer was basically involved getting folks registered and to get them appointments with Customs and Border Patrol to be exempt from the border crossing bar. And if I could now just cue up my slide, Stephanie, I wanted just to real quickly in my last minute or so share, just if you could just scroll up a little bit, the third piece of this kind of nightmare scenario, if you will. There is about a 1.4, maybe just go back down a little bit, please, to the top chart, 1.4 million case backlog in U.S. immigration courts. And so you can see here a little bit as of September 30th, which might be the most recent sort of annual statistics about this, just how long it takes, the number of days, right? This is the number of days. So if you look at all cases, and there's the number of pending cases, the average wait time that they had already waited for or they'd already been docketed as of September 2021 was about 3 years, right? And the average wait from the NTA is the charging document, the document that initiates the there's my timer, deportation proceedings. And the average wait till their next hearing is some 5 years. So there is this overwhelming backlog that has basically clogged up cases in the United States. And you can see that when the backlog is 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, the prospect of waiting in Mexico for a portion of that time, they do try to take some of the remain in Mexico cases a little sooner, but you're still looking at 1.5 years, 2 years possibly before your case is finally heard. And this is part of a larger problem with our visa system in the United States, which basically doesn't contemplate low-income workers in any meaningful sense being able to access visas to come here to help meet our labor shortage. So what does that do? It does encourage folks to apply for asylum because it's the relief, if you will, of last resort. So I feel like I've been depressing, and just so you know, you're going to hear some better news in the next part of the presentation, and there is hope, but it is a daunting, to say the least, legal, logistical, and humanitarian situation at our southern border. And I'm happy to answer questions later on, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you for elaborating on the unjust laws and policies that force asylum seekers to live in dangerous conditions at our southern border. And as Troy mentioned, we will have an opportunity for a question and answer session. So if you can, or you may want to type your questions in the Q&A now, and we'll make sure we address them. So we now have the honor of hearing from Gustavo Cermeño. He is an asylum seeker from El Salvador, born in 1990 during the middle of the war, the Civil War.
Yeah.
Back in El Salvador, Cermeño earned degrees in psychology and in English, and he worked at AT&T. He was forced to seek asylum when local gangs threatened his family if he refused to pay the monthly rent. During his journey to the United States, Gustavo met with his current partner, who gave birth to their daughter, Vilma, in Mexico.
Yeah.
They spent 3 years trying to cross the United States legally, but many who offered to help were corrupt. They finally received the help they needed from Sister Suzanne, Brother Modesto, and attorneys at the LCAU. In August of 2021, Gustavo and his family were able to cross and currently reside with a sponsor in Portland, Oregon. They are still in the process of getting their asylum petition granted. Welcome, Gustavo.
Thank you, Maria. And well, good morning, everyone. And thank you for giving me the chance to share a little bit about, let's say, our story, because now it's not just my story, it's our story, because now involves my fiance and, well, also my daughter. Basically, she was born in the middle of the way. But I would like to share a little bit about my story and also about my family's story. And it's because at this point of our lives, we're living in Portland, Oregon, but going back around 3 years ago, it was totally different. So, well, as you said, Maria, I'm from El Salvador, and I got a degree in psychologist, and I used to work for AT&T. Believe it or not, I never thought to come here to the United States. And I'm saying this because I guess the main point of this is try to clarify a little bit about what the reasons are to come here. Maybe some people think that maybe we are just maybe looking for a place to have a really good job, but it's not just in that way. Most of the time we're having problems like with these people, with the gang members, and it's because they are all around the country. Every time that they see that you have like an unstable job, they are trying to have something from you. Actually, they were trying to have $5,000 from me, and I didn't have it. So they were threatening me. They were even giving packages in front of my door, and it was so difficult to deal with because I was all the time trying to get that problem solved. I was trying to even move to another city or do things like that, and it didn't resolve it. They still sending me messages. If we found you, we know where you at and everything. So I took the decision, and even I want to say something that even one day I was in the building, I was looking through the window, and I remember that I saw that first caravan of people that they were trying to get out of El Salvador. And believe it or not, I thought, well, you know what? That's not the way that the thing's supposed to be. I mean, if you want to go to another country, you're supposed to do the things in the right way, you know. But some months later, I took the same decision to leave my country behind and try to reach another place, maybe better, I can say. So when I took the decision to come here, I met a really beautiful woman, which is day by day now my fiance. We first met in Tecunaman. It's exactly in the border between Mexico and Guatemala. So we were together for two months, and we got involved in a relationship. So we almost basically immediately we got in love. Then we were trying to travel across the Mexico, and it was difficult. I guess is the most difficult part of the way, because we were using a lot of ways to travel. We were using bus, we were using train, we were using sometimes taxis, because the taxi most of the time is asking you more than the rate that they ask to move you from point A to the point B, you know. And sometimes even they do like a little deal with the cartels. So if you say, you know what, I'm a migrant, so can you move me? But they're not gonna take you to the place that you're trying to go. What they're gonna do is that they're gonna take you with the cartels. So the cartels is going to kidnap you or do something else, you know, or put you to work and to force you to work. So I remember that one day we were sleeping on the bare roof of the train of the Beast. It's very famous train. It's the Beast. And it was around like 3 or 2 a.m. in the morning. And well, I was tightening myself with my belt, and my fiance was basically sleeping on me. I was hugging her. She was already pregnant. And well, we took around 6 months to travel from Tapachula to Mexicali. So I was on the train at the very roof, and I remember that I saw how a person fell off of the train, and the train cut his legs. And I'm not so proud of it, but the thing is, I was afraid. On that moment, I thought I should do something. But what are you supposed to do if you get off of the train? The cartels are gonna catch you, or the police, and even the police is corrupted, I can say. But when we arrived to Mexicali, we didn't have a place to go. So we went to a place that is the community center. I'm so happy, I'm so thankful with them. And the community center is Cortina. It's a place that you can go and get some food for free. And the owner is Mrs. Tamayo. Is such a really nice and a huge person. She did everything for us. We were in Mexicali for around 3 years, let's say, because well, we were trying to get at least a way to get across into the United States in a legal way. But I want to say something. I don't want to use a specific name, but what I can tell you is that I was in the line to have a number when MPP was working, when MPP was on the highest level. So I went with the officer and I asked for the number. And he said, you know what? If you need a number or if you want a number, you will have to pay for it. And I said, well, that's supposed to be free. I mean, why am I supposed to pay for it? And he said, well, is what it is. If you want it, you will need to pay for it. And if not, please get away from the line. And I said, well, okay, perfect. Thank you. So I went back to the shelter. I was talking with my fiance. I know that this is, I'm not trying to invite the people to do it, but I was frustrated. I was desperate, like everyone else in the border. So we took the decision almost exactly in the limit of the pregnancy period. And we tried to cross the border, but we couldn't get it. They catched us. And then what they did was that they put us back into Mexico in San Luis Rio Colorado. But well, I told the officer, the Custom Border Protection, a lot of times, please help us. My baby is coming. I mean, she's gonna born here. And he said, you know what? I'm sorry, I cannot do anything. So what they did was they put an injection on my fiance, and so my baby is gonna be in the belly, you know, just to hold my baby in the belly. And that caused a big problem because then we went to the hospital in Mexico exactly immediately after getting to Mexico. Once again, we went to the hospital and the doctor says, no, I'm sorry, your baby's not gonna born because they put this. Then 1 week later, my baby was born and she was blue and a little purple. And my baby was in observation for 2 days. So the doctor told me, you know what, that injection caused this problem. And I mean, my baby life was in risk. So it's the way it is. I mean, I cannot like claim anything. But well, after that, what I can tell you is that I was living in the shelter Posada del Migrante. Is one of the shelters in Mexicali that basically Mrs. Tamayo owns. And I was trying to get involved with all the migrants. And believe it or not, now I feel that I have to be a volunteer because I remember that I didn't have even $1. And Mrs. Tamayo was giving me everything. She was giving me food. She was giving me diapers. She was giving me some little jobs, at least to have some dollars or some money to get sometimes just a Coke, just to buy a Coke or have something, because Mrs. Tamayo is all the time trying to reach more resources, to have more food, to have more beds or sweaters or socks or underwear for the people that is in the shelter. And at the end, I was managing the shelter with my fiance. She was the director and I was basically the manager. And well, I remember that one day I was in the shelter very early in the morning, and my fiance told me, you know what, there is a people that wants to talk to you. He was asking if you can speak in English or not. And I said, yes, of course I can. But it's not like 100%, but at least I can speak. So he said, you know what, his name is Modesto, and he wants to talk to you. And apart from that, I can say that I was involved in a really, really good process. But actually it was with Troy. Troy was helping us. And well, I guess I was helping them to get all the information. I can say that I'm so proud that we could cross 56 families into the United States with a totally different process. And one of those families, it was mine. And well, it was a really new experience for me because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what they were expecting from me, but I was doing as much as I could, And then I want to say something exactly on the August 20th of the 2020 that we got across into Mexico. I was exactly in the border, and because we were too many, we were around 100 persons at the same time. They were trying to process everyone at the same time. So we were waiting for a long period. So we were in just one specific place that you're waiting. So I remember that my baby was trying to be fed, and my fiance was trying to feed her, but she was trying to even walk around and play around. So maybe they didn't know that Custom Border Protection didn't know that I know how to speak in English, and they were talking between each other. And I heard when one of the officers says, you know what, someone needs to shut up that little dog. So she called my daughter a little dog. That is racism, starting from the Custom Border Protection. And it's difficult because I couldn't say a thing because I was waiting to get across, And it's difficult because it's like, why you're calling my daughter a little dog? I mean, we're not doing anything wrong. We're trying to do the things in the right way. And why you're doing it? Why you're saying that? But it's the way it is. So apart from that, what I can say is that I've been trying to be in my time off, like a little volunteer. I know that I'm not doing too much, but I'm trying to be a little volunteer because I feel that that's the way that we as an immigrant, we have to be. We have to teach the people that we are here to help, that we are here to do something for us, and for the community. I've been helping with the church that is next to us, the UCC church in the cold weather shelter. I've been trying to get involved with the community. And well, I've been trying to collect even some stuff for the shelter in Mexicali because actually like 2 weeks ago, they had a problem with the electricity. And because they couldn't pay, Mrs. Tamayo couldn't pay the electricity, so they didn't have electricity for like a week. So I've been collecting. Now I'm so proud to share with you that on Saturday, I'm gonna make a little trip to LA to bring some stuff that I'm collecting. And well, that's what I can say, at least in my point, as an immigrant and an asylum seeker. And I guess that one of the biggest challenge in this process that we get is that we had no chance to have like a real job because I have to be waiting for the first court. So getting a little bit from Troy is the backlog that the courts have, because they have like 1 million something that they are waiting. So I have to wait till have at least my first court to apply for the work permit. In the meantime, I have to be, trying to resist. That's my point.
Thank you, Gustavo,
You're
for
welcome.
your powerful story of uncertainty, resilience, and hope. We pray that your asylum petition be granted soon, and that you and your family are safe.
Thank you.
We now have the honor of hearing from Amalia Cortina. She's an immigrant advocate. She fled to the United States from El Salvador in 1996. After arriving to the US and applying for a green card, she and her husband were charged with violating immigration laws and were detained for 16 months while their children ages 13, 16, and 19 lived alone. After their release from detention, both she and her husband were granted asylum. Tragically, her husband died from cancer not long after. Ms. Cortina retired and spent her time helping immigrants serving her sentence at the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. She used to conduct parenting classes to immigrants living in the Pico Union area in LA. Ms. Cortina is a precedent-setting leader whose work has laid the foundation to the empowerment of countless immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. She is the author of The Power of Love, My Experience in a U.S. Immigration Jail, and appeared along with her children in the film Posada, A Night to Cross All Borders, a documentary about unaccompanied immigrant children. Welcome, my friend, Amalia.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Good morning, everybody. I'm so honored to have been invited to talk to all of you about my story. I have talked so many times about this, and still my heart is, I don't know how many per hour, beats per hour. As Maria Elena said, I am from El Salvador. I came legally to the US in 1996. My husband came in 1995. My husband was an architect. During and after the war, he was helping to rebuild the country with money donated by USAID. He was rebuilding schools and hospitals. That made him a target of the guerrilla. Even when the peace came to El Salvador, those people remained his enemies. He was kidnapped and had to pay a ransom. He believed that his family was not safe anymore, and he convinced me that he needed to go. He thought that he had to come to the US to build a new life for his family, where we would be safe. My husband entered the US, and after a year, he asked me to join him. I didn't want to leave my children, but he convinced me, and I left. I told him, I'm gonna try for a week. And if the future is there, I stay. And of course, I stayed. Once we came to the US, we were going to apply for asylum. We didn't want to live with that fear of not having a license, not having a social security, not having an ID, completely forced to break the law. So we decided that my sister-in-law, who is American citizen living in Miami, should have a petition for us, and she agreed. So we submit the application, we paid the fees, but they told us that the waiting was going to be long. I think it was 13 years at that time. After a year in this country, to be honest, my life was miserable because I didn't have my children. I didn't want to be a provider. I really want to be a mother, to be with them, to guide them. It's so hard when you are separated from your children. You don't have any idea. I remember that when I called home, my youngest son, my boy, had hepatitis, and I was feeling guilty. I didn't know how he was feeling, and I didn't feel that it was okay to be here just sending money for them and not having them. So we decided that we should bring the children. How we can bring them? They had a visa, so we need to buy 3 tickets. When we checked the amount of the airfare, it was so expensive. So we said, oh my goodness, how are we gonna do this? So we decided in 1997 that we will live with $20 a week. That's gonna be gas, everything. And the rest we will save to buy 3 tickets. So finally, we were able to save that money. We were trying to buy cheap tickets. And we were asking, do you know where can I buy a free ticket? The tickets are so expensive. Say, oh, there's an agency in LA that they have good prices. Okay. So we called, they gave us the price. The price was very, very cheap. So we said, bingo, we have it. So the agency said, what is the day? What are the names? We bring the tickets, you pay, and you pay me in cash. We said, yeah, no problem. We have the money. So we bought the tickets. We sent them to El Salvador. My children arrived to the airport, and guess what? The tickets were not valid. So we had to start all over again because they were fraudulent. They were stolen tickets. It was horrible. But anyway, we have to start the process again. And then finally my children came, and we were so, so happy to have them with us. It was really the American dream complete for us, because when we have the children here, we thought that life is gonna be good. In 1998, after dropping my children at school, a police car stopped me and they asked me for my driver license. I didn't have it, but I have a work permit, so I show it to them. So they asked me to step out of the car. I did. They handcuffed me. They told me where I living. I told them. We drove to my house. They arrest my husband. They searched my apartment, my house, and they confiscated our passports. I told them I have a petition from my sister. They ignored it. They sent me to a basement in downtown LA at the federal building. I was there in a room with no windows, just a little metal thing that you move to communicate to the outside. A lot of women were there. They were going to be deported. And we had at one moment a child, and the lady didn't have Pampers, nothing, no milk. It was really, really difficult to witness that treatment. We were going back and forth to San Pedro Detention Center. They pressed me to sign my deportation, but my children, how can I leave my children behind? How can I do that? What is going to happen with my children if I sign deportation? So we decided that we were not going to sign deportation. We said that we have the right for an attorney, and they said, you don't have any right. You're undocumented. You don't have any right. But we did. We were strong, and we said, we're not going to sign. So they sent us to the detention center. When I arrived at the detention center, I live in a room with more than 100 women. all races, a lot of asylum seekers, mostly from China, Sri Lanka. Those were the majority, but we have people from Korea, and we have people that they were arrested in the workplace. So many cries of women leaving their children behind. So many. Different cases. They didn't have the opportunity because the court is too long and you are detained. A lot of women didn't have the patience. Their spirit of fighting was gone. The easy way, I have to leave this place. It's too much. But I stay 16 months in detention because a lot of women there were asylum seekers and they didn't have the opportunity to pay a bond. People from churches, Episcopalians, Lutherans, Catholics, Catholic Legal Immigration Network, they had a bill that it passed that if you are an asylum seeker and you don't have any criminal record, you should have the opportunity to fight your case free. So we have to wait for that. Being in detention is really hard, but the people who kept me alive were the church volunteers. They didn't offer me freedom. They didn't offer me nothing, but they were there to listen to my cries, to accompany. They were like a time to relieve our sorrows when they were there. And that's what we need. Somebody to listen to our story, somebody to really care about what you're going through. Medical attention was really hard. My husband was feeling sick. They were taking several chest x-rays. They never say what happened, what was the problem. And when he asked to the doctor said, no news, good news, stop asking. And that's what we do. As Gustavo said, it is what it is. We just swallow it and keep moving, keep going. When we were released, I remember that I promised to myself that I will never forget the cries of the women that I lived with. It was nice to leave that place, but it was hard knowing that a lot of women there deserve the same opportunity that I had. Once we were released, I lost my asylum, but I had the opportunity to send my case to the Board of Appeals. And because they studied my case and we had to prove the persecution, finally, I was able to get the asylum. We were released in 1999, in July 1999. In the year 2000, my husband was feeling really, really sick. And the doctor thought that was depression after everything that we experienced, but he had lung cancer. That's why they were taking a lot of x-rays. But we were not notified, so he didn't have treatment for that. When we were released, we didn't have a work permit, we didn't have nothing, but we were able to work as independent contractors. It was hard because you need to survive. How can you survive? They just release you and you don't have the opportunity to work. But sometimes it's easy, you can find a way, but the majority of immigrants are forced to break the law because they need to eat, pay rent, pay everything. My husband died of lung cancer. And I remember that in his last days, we sat with the children and we asked him, do you want not to go back to El Salvador, or do you want to be buried in El Salvador? And he said, no, we came here to stay. And he said to his children, you are my American dream. What you need to do is to do good and succeed, because then my American dream is fulfilled. So he passed away. And in reality, we immigrants come here because we need to live. It's not that we want to explore. I was here many times. I never thought that I was gonna be forced to leave my country. And today, I'm here to invite you to give yourself the opportunity to listen to an immigrant story, as Gustavo, as myself. You may feel uncomfortable. You may feel hurt. You may feel incapable to do something for an immigrant. But you know what? Just your presence will give dignity to a person that has nobody in this country. You will bring humanity to an immigrant that feels that is in the cracks of society, that is rejected. So please, once you do that, you will realize how blessed you are. And you will realize that you have too much. And you don't need anything. So thank you for listening to my story. And please cross the border and have compassion, because compassion knows no borders and no race. Thank you.
Amalia, what a powerful story of strength, faith, and conviction you have shared with us. Thank you. Our panelist, Sister Suzanne Jabro, a sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet of Los Angeles Province. Sister Suzanne is the founder of Border Compassion, an all-volunteer movement inviting, coordinating, and guiding faith communities to cross over, to go across and stand at the border with immigrant asylum seekers. Border Compassion forms a flexible, nimble, and efficient web of compassion. Sister Suzanne is recognized for her diocesan restorative justice ministry. She is the founder of the Center for Restorative Justice Works and its flagship program, Get on the Bus. Thank you and welcome, Sister Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Maria. I appreciate that, and all the panelists. I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for being here with us today. You are invited, each of you, to cross over into Mexicali, Mexico. Come and see for yourself and spend the day together with the migrants. These are families seeking asylum, and this is where they're living. We hear all about them on the news. And now you are invited to come and see for yourself and meet migrants in prison. Why you? Well, this is our border. The border crossing is between Calexico, California, and Mexicali, Mexico. Where is that, you ask? It's 3 hours from San Diego going east and an hour and 45 minutes from Palm Springs. Imagine this old two-story Motel 6 painted Pepto-Bismol pink. The posada has 17 bedrooms on the first floor and the same on the second. Each of these has at least 2 or 3 families living there. Each room has a shower and a toilet, no hot water. In total, there are 150 people or more. They are waiting in Mexico for their hearings and permission to cross into the United States. The countries of origin are El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. These are families. The parents' average age is 35. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of babies and small children. All day, every day, time is spent in the courtyard. It is here where they eat, play games, or sit and talk and visit. They might use one of the 2 washing machines, no dryers. There's an open kitchen with a 6-burner stove, no oven. Most often, women take turns cooking. The men are gone during the week, working day jobs. What are you invited to do for the day? First, bring yourself and your most precious gift of being a living, caring, compassionate person. You know how to play with children, blow bubbles, color, put a puzzle together. How about a visit with a mom or a group of moms? You could help with the trip for grocery shopping. We need a lot of basket pushers for $1,000 of groceries. Can you pass out ice cream, licorice, suckers to 100 kids? Why are you invited? These families are our neighbors and they are in need. Bring your welcome, your spirit of kindness and hospitality. I showed pictures like this of children. I was showing them to someone and they were standing in front of the groceries after they had been delivered. They said, isn't it terrible how these little children were thrown over the border fence and now they're unaccompanied minors. This is terrible. I said, where are you getting this? Their parents are there with them. These are not unaccompanied minors. So, well, I heard it on the news. Another voice was, why would these parents risk their lives or risk the lives of their small children and make this journey? Well, because the place they left is more dangerous. That's why. When asking a migrant, aren't there other groups of people that are bringing donations? Oh, yes, she said, there are. They drop things off and leave. You're the group that stays and spends the day with us. The asylum seekers want to see the lawyers, and they always are hoping for good news. The border is closed now. It has been 4.5 months, and we have not had one hearing. Some of the people get discouraged, and they leave. Parents in the shelter were asked, what is your greatest need? Teachers for our children, classes, English as a second language. Thanks to the Catholic Bishop of San Bernardino, who helped pay for our internet. Border Compassion is inviting you and your friends, families, campus ministry, classes, churches, school service projects, parent groups, interns for advocacy and networking, for a summer event day. Find a group, form a group. No one goes alone. I accompany all the groups and will answer all questions as you plan. Come for the day. If you cannot come, sponsor a fundraiser for food and other needs. Spend your time, talent, and treasure for our oneness in humanity. It is here on the margins we will learn to see the world through the lived experience of families on a journey in a shelter, in a country not their own, on their way to begin a new life in the United States. We see families in need of our seeing them. Be ready. You will receive more than you give. We meet our brothers and sisters who have been traveling for thousands of miles and arrive exhausted and with very little. They need support and healing. They need to know people care. They have left everything familiar to them. Do they need shoes? Yes. Do they need underwear? Absolutely. Do they need jackets in the winter and sandals in the summer? Yes. Do they need food? Yes. 450 meals a day. They are food insecure. Do they need medical supplies? Yes. Do the babies need diapers, pull-ups, milk? Yes, yes, yes. Compassion knows no border. Let's do what we can. Give yourself a gift. Come across the border and spend the day. This is where the soil is rich for transformation. You will go home changed. Join us. We need you. Be the change you want to see in the world. There is no them and us. We are one. Be a living reminder of that truth. Oh, and P.S. You need a passport. You can cross the border without one, but we'd really like you to come back. And let me take the opportunity to thank all of the supporters, all of you, for your amazing generosity and gifts to Border Compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Suzanne, for sharing with us about the families and the needs and their needs and the ways in which we all can support them, which we can join you in helping them with their needs. We thank all of our speakers who have provided us with an opportunity to become aware of the challenges and uncertainties families face as they are refused to apply for asylum at our southern border. Your stories have been so powerful, and we hope that many hearts have been transformed. We will now move into our Q&A session. I know we have some questions already on our Q&A, in our Q&A segment. If you have any other questions, please feel free to type them in. And I will now read the first question. And I don't know if so maybe possibly Troy, you might be able to answer this question. What laws are there? It says, what laws are there for economic work seeking individuals? And I'm thinking, what are some of the opportunities for those that are seeking asylum for economic advantages or jobs once you cross the border? Would you be able to answer that?
So I think I read the question in two ways. One is because it might have followed up on something that I said about how the lack of visas, of legal pathways for certain segments of society, mostly low-income, unskilled labor, are pretty much closed, and so they have resulted in kind of a leakage, if you will, into the asylum system, where people, it's the request of last resort. If you have nothing else, you can always ask for asylum. So that has done two things. It's inflated the dockets by so much, like we learned a few minutes ago. And it's also, in some senses, put those with bona fide asylum claims in kind of this larger sea of folks who are fleeing maybe economic or environmental disasters. Also good reasons to flee, right? But there's no asylum for my home was destroyed by an earthquake. There's no asylum for, with a few exceptions. There's a lot of crime in my neighborhood. You know, the grounds for asylum are relatively few. So the question was about economic and work-seeking individuals. A lot of times you hear in discourse about immigration law, okay, why can't everybody just get in line, right? We heard a little earlier from Amalia about just how long she was told when she applied through a family member. I think the wait was going to be 13 years. Well, 13 years without the ability to work, and perhaps enduring horrible conditions back at home is just, it's a fanciful sort of notion that actually would be sufficient to enable folks to migrate through family. And when it comes to work visas, there really is no, I kind of put it this way, the system is slanted toward white collar professionals. So if you are a professor or an engineer or a doctor or certain other professions, generally in the STEM field, yeah, there's a path for you through the H-1B process, and even though there's delays in that. But if you're someone who is eligible and available and interested in filling one of the, I think 12 million unfilled jobs right now in lower paying, what we used to call blue collar jobs, there's really no meaningful avenue to get a visa. There is no, I want to be a nanny visa. There is no, I want to be a gardener visa. There for all these jobs that need to be done in the United States, is really no meaningful visa situation that's initiated by the one who's seeking the visa. So the laws that are there for economic and work-seeking individuals are there if you're in the kind of upper strata of professional life and society. They're not there if you are someone who is more of a working class background, with a couple of exceptions that are almost too negligible to mention, and that have their own abuses. And then I'll be quiet. The questions related to, can asylum seekers work? Well, first of all, they need to have been part of the process, and so if Title 42 has resulted in them being expelled or turned back at the border, they're not going to be given any work permit in the United States for sure. If they are subject to NPP and thus cooling their heels in Mexico, then there's really no meaningful work permit in the United States. The law requires that your asylum application be pending for 150 days, 150, and then after that you can apply for a work permit based on your pending asylum application. But however, if you can't get into court to file your asylum application, and the system is so backlogged that you're not even starting the process, either because you're cooling your heels in Mexico, or you've been expelled at the border, or even once you get into the United States, you're waiting for a good 5 to 6 months before the work permit comes. It's a huge disincentive and frankly, a punitive, mean-spirited, frankly, measure that our government takes to discourage folks from applying for asylum. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy, for clarifying for me. So the next question is 200,000 asylum seekers, where are they housed? Basically wherever they can, right?
I mean, I can take this one too. So 65,000 were subjected to the Remain in Mexico policy. I think that was the last figure. So 65,000 of them were in Mexico during the earlier iteration of that policy. And now again, some of them are still there. The way the system is supposed to work is that folks are supposed to be released into the community and allowed to pursue their case while, for example, staying with a sponsor or family members, and finding a lawyer, and then after that 5 months, getting your work permit, getting a job, getting established, and then having your immigration case 3 or 4 years down the line, sadly. A lot of them are housed, and certainly under the last administration, are housed in our country's private for-profit prison system, where communities and private corporations are, and their shareholders are being paid insane amounts to keep people, asylum seekers, detained in private and quasi-private prisons. They look like prisons, they are prisons, called detention centers. So that's where a lot of them are housed. I would say that I don't have statistics around, I don't even know if they even exist exactly, about where people are generally housed, but the ideal is that they should be in the community and starting to integrate into economic life. And the reality is that sadly, they're dispersed in some really frightening conditions of detention and of open air detention, if you want to call it that, on the other side of the Mexican border.
Thank you. How many seekers, or the percentage, have assumed new jobs in life in Mexico, south of the border? Is there a certain number?
Maybe Gustavo would have an idea about this, because he lived in the shelter for so long, of not just so I'm not talking too much, but also what's your sense, if you don't mind, what's your sense of folks who were working in the shelter? What were they doing? Were they doing it legally, for example?
Sometimes it's available an option with Mexico government that you can get like a work permit, so you can get the court. It's the number they gave you to have a real job and maybe establish another life. But most of the time is, if you're coming from American Central, like Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, maybe you can stay in Mexico and try to establish your life over there. But what about if you're from Mexico and you're trying to run away from Mexico? That could maybe answer one of the questions. So let's say in percentage, maybe the 30 or the 40% of the people that gets into Mexico maybe establish a life in Mexico, because there's a lot of people in Mexico. But maybe the 60 or the 70%, they always try, as me, to get into the United States.
Thank you, Gustavo. And Gustavo, you probably have a good idea of the seekers. How are the people there? The families, I'm sure they're trying. Can you say more about them trying to learn English, and what are they doing to learn English?
Yes, actually, one of those people is my fiance. And I'm so thankful with the UCC Church, because they have a group of people that they are working to help us. And what we're doing is that we're going to the, let's say, the public places. So like the library tool, my fiance is in one of the, it's like a training and some studies to learn English. So she's going to the public library, or sometimes through Zoom, to learn English. But also, maybe I'm gonna say something that it's not on my side, but I want to share it because we're working in the middle of it, is that Sister Suzanne is trying to apply now a new system that is teach the people how to speak in English in the shelter, so they might be able to speak before they come. But there's many options, even online. There are some courses online that they can get, but also here in the United States, there's also options like the public library or some other foundations, organizations that they can work with it.
Sister Suzanne, would you like to add to that?
Oh, well, thank you, Gustavo, for that. We had a lot of people come forward to say they like to help with education. And we're going to have a meeting this Thursday about that. And we did purchase some iPads and laptops in order to do some programming so that we could Zoom with people that are in the shelter, and the shelter people could Zoom and speak to us. And we could have teachers that would be online. And yesterday I spoke with one of the teachers that was in the past school, and he's very interested in helping us set up the internet that would be more stable for us, and to begin working on that. So it's not up yet. The education has been very sporadic, coming and going. the different programs that were on and they were off. And you know, it's like pandemic is everywhere, right? So they were people able to come, and we weren't able to go during most of the pandemic the first year. So it was erratic, but we're on the road again. So I'm looking forward to that. This is really necessary. Very, very necessary. They can't just sit there all day long, especially if it's month after month after month. The education is critical.
Thank you. And Troy, I'm not sure if you've answered this question, but it says, has the law changed with regards to asylum seekers being able to enter the U.S. either at the port of entry or by stepping on the U.S. soil? In other words, aren't MPP victims entering legally?
Yeah, so I think I was talking about that right as I was winding down, but
Oh, yes.
the law, no, but I'm happy to elaborate. The law changed in a bad way in August because the ACLU had been litigating to have the Title 42 policy overturned. And as part of the settlement negotiations with the Biden administration, they had set up a system of exemptions. And for about 6 months, I want to say from March to September, folks falling within one of three categories were able to get an appointment to cross. That's what Sister Suzanne was talking about and that Gustavo was talking about. And the three criteria or the three categories of exemption were folks with severe medical conditions, folks, families with small children, and folks who are vulnerable to, for example, because they're members of the LGBTQ community. And that process was working pretty well. And it wasn't frankly that hard to get a border crossing appointment if you could make just a sort of a good faith showing that you fell into one of those categories. And of course, you've seen the pictures. A lot of these families did have little kids, right? But frankly, as the situation at the border along the Texas border heated up with arrivals of migrants, politically, it was a bit of a hot potato in my view for the Biden administration, and they withdrew from settlement negotiations and they stopped that process. So that window closed in August. And since then, we're back to that policy of the border being closed to all but, to being closed pretty much only to asylum seekers. As I said earlier, back and forth commercial traffic and educational traffic and tourism now has resumed as of November. The only category that they do not want to seem to allow, and it's one that's much tinier than every other category, are asylum seekers. And the question also addressed whether folks who have a foot on U.S. soil, well, there are some folks who slip through if they cross in between ports of entry. But the big chunk of them are intercepted and flown back on expulsion flights, either to southern Mexico, or if they're, depending on their nationality, sometimes they're bused to San Diego and just returned over the port of entry in San Diego, Tijuana. I have not heard evidence of folks being able to get around either MPP or Title 42 in recent months.
And how does someone become a host family for someone waiting for asylum hearings, such as Gustavo?
Well, I guess the best answer, maybe Troy has it, because there is an option, is a legal form that you have to fill first to be a sponsor. But most of the time, what the people like me does is that you can talk with your relative, with your friend, and that's what we did, you know. It's like, we're going to your place. Can I give your number to the migration officer? And they just call to your relative or to your friend, and they are asking if you know these people. And basically that's a process. But there is another legal process if you don't know the people that is asking for a sponsor that you have to fill, and is the form. And I will ask Troy if he can help me with it.
I would just add that there is a need and a pretty structured process for matching sponsor volunteers with folks coming out of immigration detention in the United States. It's a little bit less structured and set up for example, folks waiting in Mexico, just because, as you've learned, I think, the process is so long. If maybe later I can provide the link to this one of the sponsorship projects, but they will do training, and there's always a need, in my experience, for good willing folks who are willing to open up their home for, it can be a several month period, or at least until somebody gets on their feet while after they've been released from detention in the United States.
Thank you. And are there any hopes for that the present situation will change for the migrants waiting to apply?
What do you think, Suzanne?
Well, yeah, I'm always hopeful. You know, I remember when we were going through the pandemic, and all of a sudden you came with the connection with ACLU, and Gustavo, humbly today, not mentioning how much he helped the lawyers, because he was, you know, like AT&T over there, and helping, you know, because we couldn't always be there, and he was keeping the list going. And it was like watching the Red Sea part or something. I mean, so many people got hearings and hurried and got on their buses and went to Tijuana, and a pastor and his wife picked them up at the bus, housed them overnight, fed them, and got them all to their hearings. And then they're WhatsApping us as they've arrived in, you know, in the United States. And Gustavo played a big part in it. He's humble today because he worked tirelessly, and he got to learn what the situation had to be on the application. So he turned back people and say, no, they'll never accept this, rewrite this. So he was helping the migrants with their paperwork. And the word got out in Tijuana, where are all these people coming from? He says, oh, they're coming from Mexicali. Well, what is going on in Mexicali? And there was this very tight team. And that's why the invitation to all of you today, because people come with their gifts. And I don't know how your gift gets triggered, whether you go back home and tell the story, or whether you say, I've got to go back again, or what gifts you bring to the community here. But everybody plays a part, and many migrants do too. And we're on a team, and we're doing our best, and it's humanity at its best, and community too.
So we have another question in our chat for you, Suzanne. Where is the greatest need, and how can my church help?
Well, the greatest need I see is food and clothing right now, especially underwear. And we need our faith communities, whatever denominations or whatever groups, they need to come and see themselves, because the information that is on television is depersonalizing, demoralizing, deinstitutionalizing. It's just terrible. And you see something completely different. And the only way the transformation is going to happen is if you put yourself with those on the margins and learn from them. And so we had a faith community come, two faith communities, St. Margaret's Episcopal and Our Lady Queen of Angels from Newport Beach. And both of their pastors came. The people were putting on the posada, and we were preparing for Christmas. And the change that happened, the Episcopal Church will be going back on the 24th. And Our Lady Queen of Angels wants to have the shelter be their mission and have the people from the parish go 3 or 4 times a year. So, and I'm very happy that Our Lady of Peace Academy in San Diego at CSJ High School will be joining the Sisters of St. Joseph in May when they cross for their second time. We will go February 10th next week, but we will go again at that time in that high school will join us. So I know some of you can't cross, but you might want to do a fundraiser, especially during Lent, during this season that calls us to go to the margins and to serve those most in need. So.
Thank you. Are the migrants in detention centers waiting for a court date, or are they waiting to make an application to file asylum? For asylum?
Both, actually. The migrants who are in detention here in the United States are usually waiting a court date. It should be noted that the backlog in detained case is shorter. They do try to, move those cases along, but they can still take 6 months, a year. I mean, a year and a half, 2 years. I've seen that. It's not 5 years, but when you're detained, that's a long time. And their asylum application is due 1 year after, no later than 1 year after their last arrival in the United States. So they're both, assuming they're asylum seekers, and some people have other immigration defenses or avenues for relief, we like to say. But for the asylum seeker, generally they want to get that filed. They must get it filed within 1 year. And yeah, so they're both waiting for their next appointment in court. And sometimes if it's not been a year, they are still trying to find a lawyer or working on their asylum application themselves, which a lot of folks go unrepresented because there's just not enough lawyers, pro bono lawyers or legal aid lawyers. But yeah, so they're waiting generally for both.
Thank you. There was a question about the link to this recording, and please know that if you registered, you will get an email with the link, and you can share that link with others once you receive that. So thank you for asking that question. I believe that is the end of our questions for today, and I want to thank our panelists for making time to be able to share your stories, your experience, your involvement in the ways you are helping. We thank our participants. And the panelists, you provided us with so much awareness that will help us move into action and be involved somehow. Thank you all. Now I would ask that to close, if each one of you share one final comment and 1 or 2 sentences that you think would summarize your experience here today. Thank you. Let's see, Sister Suzanne, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would. I know from looking at the comments today, I want to thank you, Amalia and Gustavo. You've been on the road, you've lived the experience, and stories carry the day. And you use the Jesus strategy when we share stories. And so your stories were powerful today. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable in the way that you were, to be able to share that. It goes a long way. People remember that. And when people come over the border, it's what the stories they tell when they go back that filters through our communities, which is really critically important. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you. Gustavo?
Well, first, I want to thank all the people that is listening to this conference, symposium, because at least they are taking the time to hear a little bit about us, about our stories, about how difficult it was. And also, I want to invite the people to, to get involved in all of this that is basically with the migrants. And I just want to say, I would like to do something to remove that thought that we are criminals or something like that. I mean, we're good people, and we're just having troubles in our countries. Most of the people, I mean, like 95% of the people that is here, we've been having problems. So we're nice people, we're good people. We just want to be here to have a better life, And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gustavo. Troy?
Sure. I guess my parting thought would be changing hearts and minds happens through forums like this and through the amazing work of Sister Suzanne and her group, but also around dinner tables and when we get back to offices around water coolers, among folks who may have just be getting sort of a glimpse of kind of the party line, you know, what we hear in the general media or perhaps niche media about things like, why don't you just get in line? Why don't they just get in line? Why don't they just stop coming? So I would invite folks to, number one, educate themselves through events like this, but also through a few of the facts maybe that you've gleaned, and to push back a little bit in conversations and say, you know what, it's actually not true. There is no line for low-income working class migrants to get visas. There is a big problem with keeping people on the Mexican side of the border in some of the most dangerous cities on the planet who are trying to do things the right way, ask for asylum at the southern border. Anyways, just to listen and to advocate in the settings of your life. Thank you.
Thank you. Amalia?
Lunchtime. Make sure to drink water.
Thank you so much for listening to our stories. I just want to leave thinking about Mary and Joseph. How many times they were rejected when they asked for posada. And I wonder if they were rejected because people fear, because they didn't know who they were. So just give yourself an opportunity to bless people with your presence. Simple. Migrants, asylum seekers, we just need that human love, you know, to make us feel worth it, to give us the chance to prove you that we want to come here to make this country better, helping, and we are thankful. And let me tell you this, we can pay everything. The price can be higher, but the goal is to succeed and be safe and feed our children, our families, give them a better future. I know that if you were in our situation, you would cross the river, you would walk miles just to have your family secure. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Melda. Thank you, all of you, for your powerful testimony and your very informative sharing about the policies, Troy. Suzanne, your compassion for these families and the gift that you have that energizes everyone to help is just wonderful. I'm so grateful for all of you to be here today. And of course, I thank all of our participants. And I know that our heart's been touched. And we hope that we can move into action somehow. And one thing I always share is, if there is one thing we can do, is share what we just learned, what we just heard with someone else. Thank you all. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.